Genesis paper number 3, Mechanics around entrapment of souls in third dimension. When sleeping women wake, mountains will move. Chinese proverb. 1. Abstract. The internet is full of websites declaring that Lord Enki is a true friend of humanity, and many still see him as our only hope for the future. They have read Sitchin's work and other researchers' interpretation of the Sumerian cuneiform, realizing that mankind is in deep trouble. EnlilYhwh cannot be trusted, because he already eradicated mankind once, and probably wouldn't hesitate to do it again. There seem to be other, more gentle, gods mentioned in the Enuma Eli's, but they seem to be of lower rank and don't have influence enough to save us. It's confusing to people. The gods are coming back, they say, even Sitchin did in his book, The End of Days, but who, then, are the good guys? Well, in a confusion, people are looking for a stable datum they can use to help themselves out of the condition. This stable datum is Ea, or Enki. After all, he was supposedly the one who created mankind, according to Sitchin, so we owe him our allegiance and put our hopes to him. He must be the good guy we all are waiting for. These days, many people are anticipating Enki's return. He will be our new Jesus and save us from evil hits. Not even Sitchin glorified Ea the way some New Age cults and authors do today. We're heading towards the end of the age of Pisces, Enki's sign, and are moving towards the age of Aquarius. Hence, many think that now, by the end of this approximately 2,200 years cycle, Enki must return. This has to be the secret behind the connection to his astrological sign. I would say, don't hold your breath. The good ones, as the saying goes, will not land on the White House lawn. And if the reader is wishing Enki to come back, I think you will reconsider after you have read through this series of papers. Keep in mind that all that have contacted us directly, saying they want to save us, have their own agenda, which does not coincide with ours. We are our own saviors, period. I've mentioned it a lot in Level I, but I will take a new slant on it in the last solution section of Level 2 as well. 2. The Untold Tale of Two Brothers. People who have read Sitchin and other authors have learned that King Anu had two sons, two brothers, who in fact were half-brothers or step-brothers, and their names were Enlil and Enki, although both are actually titles, not names. We have learned that Enlil supposedly means Lord of the Airways or Lord of Command in the ancient languages, while Enki is said to mean Lord of Earth. In Sitchin's work, and also according to the A.M.I. Def themselves, Enlil's name is Namur, while Enki became known later as Ea, he whose home is water, Poseidon Neptune owns, and just recently, Ankur won. It is peculiar, however, that Enlil goes under the name Namur. Namur is clearly an Aryan feminine name if we trace back the linguistics and also per Morning Sky's translations, and means mother. However, we see this happen a lot with Assyrian, Sumerian gods. They take Aryan feminine names and make them masculine, perhaps in an attempt to insult the queen and the mother goddess. Other names for Enlil is Zeus, Jupiter, Azhar, and Yhvhyhovah. For simplicity, however, I will call these two brothers Enlil and Enki in this level of learning. Figure 3.1 and 3.2. Enki left as owns the fish god, and Azhar right, a later development of Enlil. Keep in mind, however, that this is how they were depicted in Mesopotamia and Babylon. As we shall see later, this is not even close to how they really looked like. At one point, for reasons we will get into, the Syrians took on human bodies when mingling with humans. We are taught that the two brothers have the same father, who is Anu, but they have different mothers. According to most sources, Enlil's mother is Ki, who is also Anu's half-sister. Incest is common amongst the Syrian overlords, while Enki's mother was not of Anu's bloodline, so therefore, although Enki is the firstborn, as it were, he is not, according to Syrian law, first in the throne succession. In Sirius it's the father's bloodline that counts, while in Orion it's the mother's. Hence, Enlil is the lawful heir to the Syrian throne. Enki's mother is mostly known as Antu, which means the one and only mother of heaven, if we follow Morning Sky's linguistics. This, of course, makes us think of the Orion Queen herself, the one and only mother of heaven, the Orion Empire. Sounds suspiciously similar to the Queen. Moreover, if we continue researching this, we find from different sources that Antu and Namu are one and the same, as, for example, here in Wikipedia. But there is still the problem of who will keep the cosmos working. Enki, who might have otherwise come to their aid, is lying in a deep sleep and fails to hear their cries. His mother Namu, creatrix also of Abzu and Tiamat, brings the tears of the gods before Enki, bold not in original, too. In Anton Park's chronicles, Enki's mother, and later lover, was Mumitu Namu. We know that both the terms Namu and Tiamat means mother goddess, and who is known as the star being most closely connected with the mother goddess? Exactly, the Orion Queen. And what else do we know? Well, we know that there was a peace treaty between Orion and Sirius, where the Orion Queen married the Khanus of Sirius, the one Sitchin calls Anu. So if Namutia Antu is Enkai's mother, that makes her the Orion Queen. The Queen of the Stars is Enkai's mother. This fact has been totally missed or neglected, both by researchers such as Sitchin and followers of his material. Also, those who study mythology have missed this important point. Their research stops when they realize that the two brothers had two different mothers, but apparently the same father, Anu. But wait, is Anu really the father of both the Enlil and the Nki? No, how could he? The marriage between Queen Nkht and Anu was pure business and sexless, while Anu on the side had many wives and lovers among Syrian women. So it's safe to say that the Enlil is pure Syrian, while the Nki, on the other hand, is pure Aryan. This becomes obvious when we realize that for the queen to produce a son, he needs to come from an unfertilized egg due to how the queen's genetics is set up. If Enki was a female, Anu could potentially have been his father, but under these circumstances, it's physically impossible. Enki has no father at all, due to that he was born from an unfertilized egg. That makes him of pure Orion blood, while Enlil is of pure Syrian blood. So how can they be half-brothers or step-brothers? Simply because Anu is Enki's stepfather, which makes Enlil Enki's stepbrother. Consequently, the Orion Queen is Enlil's stepmother, and there we have the full relationship between the two brothers. This also explains why they are so typically different in nature, Enlil being the hot-headed, bloodthirsty Syrian overlord, while Enki is known to have a softer temper and being more compassionate. However, as we shall see, Enki has been quite glorified in our history, and the question is if he deserves his good reputation. At the end of Level 2, when the cards are all laid on the table, it's up to you, the reader, to decide. Figure 3.3. Diagram showing the relationship between the entities after the Orion-Syrian business deal marriage. Click on the picture to enlarge. The old records declare that Enki was the master scientist whom, together with his half-sister, lover, and consort, Ninehursag, the goddess of life, or the goddess of fire, manipulated the DNA of an existing race to create a slave race for the patriarchs. This slave race became, after many failed attempts, Homo sapiens. Some say that there were genesis scientists also among the Syrians, besides Ninehursag and Inki for short, but I believe that's a truth which needs some modification. The Syrians could manipulate DNA of already existing star beings, but they couldn't create something from scratch. In Barbara Marcinak's book, Earth, Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library, the Pleiadians say that these master geneticists learned their trade from the Ancient Ones, which corresponds with the Aryans, too. Another clue to Enki's connection to Orion. We are going to leave Enki and the Enlil and return to them in upcoming papers after this little introduction. Instead, we will move on with explaining certain things that are crucial to understand before we can go forward with our story. 3. Depiction of the gods. In earlier papers I have talked about nanotravel, which means that ants don't travel in 3D bodies and spaceships between the stars, but shrink themselves to nanosize and travel through stargates, albeit, today the most advanced apps don't use stargates anymore, but travel through mini black holes. More about that later. I would say that most ants, those who can travel freely between the dimensions, do so in the nano world. It is hard for us who have been 3D beings for so long to think in these terms, but the more we ponder it, the sooner our neurological pathways will change and it gets easier to grasp this multidimensional concept. The dimensions they live in are just as physical to them as our third dimension is for us. The difference is that they can travel freely wherever they want in the universe, many times faster than light. Quantum physicists have in recent years proved that nanoparticles can travel faster than light, hence violating Einstein's theory of relativity. Traveling the nano world is the same as traveling the KHAA. It requires spiritual knowledge, but also knowledge about the mechanics of the universe and the multiverse to sail the ocean of KHAA. What ants have in common is that they all visit the nano world to travel long distances, and possibly spaceships to do stellar travel. It wouldn't be convenient for any star race just to travel through space without using stargates, intergalactic highways, or black holes. The distances are too enormous. It would take too long. So bottom line is that we humans need to learn how to do this, too, before we can reach the stars, or we'll be homebound until we do. Billions of dollars of tax money in the black budget is invested in nanotechnology these days, and learning how to nano-travel is the main reason. The upper echelon of the global elite knows that those who control the nano world control the universe. Still, we need to learn how to travel without technology, or almost without technology, or we'll be limited. My point with all this is to eventually prove that ants have existed on our planet since our deception. They have come in all shapes and forms, many in spirit only. Others prefer to participate in the 3D reality and then need to do so in a physical body, because after all, this is a physical world made out of very condensed energies we choose to call matter, but is basically just another form of energy, and basically an illusion. Unless an ET is just browsing or observing, they would probably want to be part of the physical reality. So, summits, at least to begin with, before there were any human bodies on Earth, either used their avatars to manifest, or came in spirit only without manifesting. If they needed a solid body, they had to create them here with genetic engineering, or insert them through time portals, more about that later in this paper. Then they could jump from body to body, whatever shape these bodies had, humanoid, reptilian, insectoid, etc. Later on, when Earth was inhabited by humanoid life forms, ants could insert their soul into these bodies, or hijack a body who already had a soul, and either kick the original soul out or share space with this original soul. Kicking out souls from an existing body and take it over is usually called walk-in in metaphysics and exopolitics. Cloning was another working solution. By genetically cloning an existing body template, whole star races could hypothetically come here and invade Earth if they wanted. If they were technologically savvy enough and had knowledge to work on some level as founders, they would know how to mass clone biological life forms. Thus, they could keep lots of bodies in storage here, keeping them dormant, nano-travel back to their home planet and nano-travel back here again and wake up these dormant bodies and get to work. One could speculate that if a star race came here to invade in the physical, they would perhaps genetically engineer a being that is stronger, taller, more muscular, and less likely to succumb in battle, perhaps a scaly reptilian, or a flying dragon. By the time Homo sapiens were created, the Ents usually took human bodies, just like they do today, and mingled with the earthbound humans. No one could tell the difference, and nor can we today either. The reader has probably passed a few on the street every now and then, being clueless that they were not human. However, today it's become quite common that Ents come here as unto energetics, life forms without bodies, and use avatars to manifest as scary reptilians, greys, dracos, or whatnot in order to confuse and show authority, although some of these beings people see are very physical and live underground, being survivors of very old genetic experiments taking place here on Earth before Homo sapiens were created. So there are many ways for a star being to come to Earth and take form. For example, weren't the Anunnaki giants? This is what we learned in much of the available literature on the subject. I, on the other hand, is telling the reader they were dwarfs, at the size of a 10-year-old. And some, as the reader probably have heard, were dragons and reptilians. How does all this fit together? Well, as we have learned, the term Anunnaki, if we choose to use this term, is a composite of many different races, not only Syrians, so one would expect that they come in different shapes and forms. Many of them could have used their avatars and shapeshift into anything they wanted, and that's part of it, but let's look at it from another angle as well. We know that star races, to be able to travel long distances, need to use nano-travel, and the majority, unless they are highly evolved, take advantage of existing stargates and galactic star lanes to go from one place to another. So also the Surian overlords. However, at the time when they came to Earth, they traveled the KHAA in their hollowed-out asteroids. They were highly developed technologically, and used what was called a push-pull drive to travel the universe, something Morning Sky also mentioned in his pre-Terra papers. This way, they could shrink themselves in the ship while entering a stargate and sailing the KHAA on the galactic highways. They were known as masters in navigating the KHAA, so they could hide in what used to be called hyperspace until they chose to enter space-time again and surprise their enemies by seemingly popping up from nowhere with whole armadas of asteroids. Point in case is that they had the ability to expand themselves instantly as soon as they left the KHAA and entered what LPGC calls forward-space/time, or the known universe. Some of the well-known Syrians seem to have been using giant human bodies as well while here on Earth, if we are interpreting the Sumerian cuneiform correctly, while others, like Thothmingishzida, were actually born on Earth and grew up here just like any human, but with their memory bank intact. They also lived much longer than normal humans, inhaling gold and probably drinking SMA as well. Figure 3-4. Surian overlord sitting in a chair, but still same height as those who stand up. If this Surian would stand up, he would be a giant. Is this a correct interpretation, or is it just the artist's freedom to express and herself? Many scriptures, besides the Bible, talk about that there were giants in the earth in these days. They were called the Watchers or the Igigi, and they were giants who came down to earth to copulate with earth women. They produced offspring that were perhaps even more gigantic than the Watchers themselves. This offspring was called the Nephilim. However, the Watchers were not Syrians, but Pleiadians, who were indeed large in stature, bird-like and reptilian-like. They, too, came via the nano-world, but used cloned, giant bodies when they entered forward-time/space and descended on Earth. According to Marcion IX Pleiadian group, these Watchers Pleiadians are actually giants on their home planet, too, being bird-like reptilians. This is probably the reason they chose giant bodies while on Earth. They felt comfortable in them. Figure 3-5. Bubin, Alpha Draconis in comparison with Sirius and Orion, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. Another star race which has had quite some influence on Earth history is the Alpha Draconians. It has come to my knowledge that Tubin and other stars in the Draco star constellation were once conquered by the Sirians and are now of Sirian domain. In fact, Tubin, Alpha Draconis, is one of the most important bases of the Sirian Empire, besides Sirius itself. So Tubin is now inhabited both by Sirians, has a Sirian king, but the original, intelligent race who lived there before the invasion are now minions to the Sirian overlords, and perhaps even slaves. We have already talked about shapeshifting in other papers, and we know that's done by using avatars, light bodies. I said earlier that ufologists and exopoliticians are patiently trying to categorize different alien types and figure out who is working with whom, an impossible task until they understand that most of these species people encounter are shapeshifters. I just saw a reference in the Pleiadian book, Family of Light, as well on this subject. Because many of the visitors are shapeshifters, you have not been able to categorize and name them, which is, of course, your 3D linear approach. 5. And here, again from the same source, your ancestors spoke with the gods and knew that they took many forms, that they were multidimensional shapeshifters, existing sometimes as humans, or animals, sometimes taking the forms of snakes, serpents, dragons, and reptiles. They flew in the heavens and swam in the oceans and walked the earth. 6. 4. More on A.M.E, aka Nibiru. Dr. A.R. Borden of LPGC told me a couple of years ago about the catastrophe that happened over in Sirius about 1 billion years ago. 3. Sirius C exploded, became a nova and shrunk into a white dwarf, which is still its condition today. But before the star became a nova, at least one of their planets, only one planet is mentioned, was catapulted out in deep space due to gravitational issues related to changes in their unstable sun. This planet is known today under many names, such as Nibiru, Planet X, and now through LPGC, A.M.E, which supposedly also is what the inhabitants of this planet are calling it. A.M.E, after had cruised deep space for a long time, was pulled in by Neptune's gravity and entered our solar system. According to Sitchin, a moon of this renegade planet, which is allegedly at least 6 times bigger than Earth, collided with Earth, which at that point was orbiting the Sun between Mars and Jupiter. After had created quite some havoc, A.M.E was slung out in deep space again, just to return after approximately 3,600 years. The next passing was harsher, Sitchin said. Again, one of A.M.E' moons collided with Earth, which was much larger than it is today, and split it in half. A.M.E disappeared out in deep space once again and had at this point become a member of our own solar system, albeit with a much wider orbit. Earth was disrupted in its orbit and eventually found its place between Venus and Mars, while the other half of our planet became the asteroid belt. This story has some similarities to my own, but more differences than similarities, really. Sitchin fails to tell us that Terra Earth was inhabited before the catastrophe, and that the catastrophe did not happen due to A.M.E' passing, but because of space wars. With that said, it doesn't mean that A.M.E/Nibiru does not exist. I'm convinced it does. A.R. further told me that the A.M.E became spacefaring around 8-9 million years ago as a civilization type 0-4, but encountered another star race who helped them become a civilization type 1. They are excellent miners and are interested in, besides gold, quartz and other tight lattice crystals. They are still here and have free platforms in the inner parts of the solar system, and bases on some of the moons around the outer planets, Neptune in particular. Where, exactly, the platforms in the inner solar system are located, I was not being told, but I have my suspicions. He is also mentioning in passing that the Sirians who are home and away groups are of the same genetic stem, which to me indicates that AR is talking about home being Sirius and away being A.M.E. So where does A.M.E fit into this whole picture if it's not the home planet of the Sirians? According to AR, the Sirians, or at least the A.M.E, if we are to separate the two groups, were not spacefaring when A.M.E was catapulted out in space 1 billion years ago. They had no place to go, no spaceships to leave the planet with, and no nano-travel to rely on, so all they had left to do in order to survive was to go underground. Albeit not spacefaring, they were probably technologically advanced enough to realize that the catastrophe was coming, and I'm sure they had plenty of time to figure out how to be able to live beneath the surface. They may, or may not, have had the insights that the planet would be catapulted out, but it doesn't matter. Going underground would probably be the best way to survive anyway. Here is the interesting part, though. If AR is correct, the inhabitants of A.M.E may not have known about the other Sirian civilizations on the other planets orbiting Sirius A and Sirius B. It sounds like, from what AR says, that those who evolved on one or several planets around Sirius A and B were seeded by the same founders as the ones living on A.M.E, because he tells us they are of the same biological stem. From all the information I have gathered from AR, internet sources, books, and anonymous sources, I have come to the following conclusion. When A.M.E was catapulted out from Sirius 1 billion years ago, there were no spacefaring beings at all in the Sirius star system. However, Perhaps even shortly after A.M.E left, another branch of Syrians, who became the Syrian overlords, evolved on another planet around Sirius A and OB. They are the ones who got involved in space wars and eventually made a peace treaty with the Queen. This group was eventually being led by the one whom Sitchin calls King Anu, which is probably not his real name, as Anu means heaven, something we learn from almost anyone who has studied Old Sumerian cuneiform, and is therefore probably just a title. His real name is lost or was never given to mankind. The home Syrians were the ones who conquered space and built the Syrian Empire, something that probably happened way earlier than 8-9 million years ago. However, due to that, A.M.E was no longer orbiting any star in Sirius, but had been adopted by our own solar system. The home Syrians may not have known about the existence of the A.M.I until much later, when they invaded our solar system. The Aryans may have known about them, but didn't pay much attention to them as they were living underground and minded their own business. After all, and this is something mainstream scientists have started realizing, there are many civilizations who are living inside their planets. It's almost as common as living on the surface. At one point, however, and this comes from AR as well, the A.M.I people started building a huge city above ground on the A.M.E planet, shielded under a cupola to begin with, using an artificial atmosphere. With time, they figured out that they could use the heat from inside their planet and direct it to create an atmosphere that would hold up even in deep space, but they needed gold to be able to stabilize it. A.M.E probably had its own gold resources that they could use in the beginning, but after a while they must have depleted themselves of it and needed gold from elsewhere. This was probably one reason why they developed into a spacefaring race some 8-9 million years ago, although not as advanced as the home Syrians, and they most certainly did not use hollowed out asteroids at this point. That was a technology developed by the home Syrians, not the A.M.I. So who was it that came to Earth, interfering with the Queen's initial project, the home Syrians or the A.M.I? Well, it's obvious it was the home Syrians, led by Prince Enlil. Whether the A.M.I had landed on Terra before the home Syrians or not, I will not debate, because I don't know, but it's possible. However, it's reasonable to believe they couldn't stay long here each time they arrived, every 3,600 years, because their planet did not linger in our solar system for any extended amount of time, but instead continued its journey into deep space. So if they were here, digging for gold, they must have stayed only briefly, and it would be too much of a coincidence if they were here at the exact same time when Enlil and his people first encountered Aridu, our solar system. So the home Syrians were the ones who started the serious efforts of digging for gold and minerals and were the ones who defeated the Aryans in the War of the Titans. However, at one point or another, the home Syrians, now stationed in Aridu, noticed the incoming A.M.E. They may have explored it and found it to be inhabited. In their usual manner, the home Syrians probably occupied this new world and took command over it. It must have puzzled them at first, noticing that the A.M.I were of the same stock as they were, and when they found out that the A.M.I were their own long-lost cousins, they may have started being softer with them. Understanding more about Syrian mentality, I can imagine that when Anu was informed about the found, he declared A.M.E Syrian property and the inhabitants were incorporated into the Syrian Empire and had to obey Syrian laws. However, this was also a great opportunity to see to that his son, Enlil, stayed away from Anu's planet, the king always being nervous about that his son was going to overthrow him. So, it's plausible that King Anu put Enlil in command over A.M.E, which in certain terms now became the prince's domain. This theory makes sense in many ways, and all the different stories come together. The A.M.I people became the Syrian miners, who had to work long hours in the mines, digging up gold, quartz, and tight latticed crystals. The home Syrians, with Lord Enlil in command, were already excellent miners, but probably still had a lot to learn from the A.M.I, so they combined their knowledge and skills and thus they could be more sufficient. Albeit, the A.M.I miners started feeling more like slaves than workers, and I can imagine Lord Enlil treating them like we treated the black people we hijacked from Africa once upon a time and made slaves to the rich families in America. Sad thing, as above, so below. Enlil may have talked them into continuing their mining for quite a while, letting them know that they needed gold to sustain and maintain their atmosphere, hence requiring that they stop complaining. This is a working hypothesis, so I am going to use it in these papers. All evidence, and the sources I've been able to find, are pointing me in this direction. The home Syrians and the A.M.I are two different species, but still of the same humanoid stem, although I would call them humanoid wolven reptilian. Do they even look the same? They probably do, perhaps with some minor differences, after all being seated on different planets. However, I have no real evidence of how the original A.M.I looked like, but with time there is a chance I can find out. 5. The third dimension. It takes a lot of effort to keep the third dimension in place, as it seems. This dimension is a dimension of solidity, where light has been trapped so it can form matter. It's a construct which can act as a playground for non-physicals onto energetics from other dimensions and superdomains. Many are curious about how it is to live here, to experience a human body, have sex, and touch and hold all these things that are available in the physical world. Many star races may have started out as physical beings, only to choose to become onto energetics at one point or another. Not all star races are founders either, so they don't know how to clone or genetically engineer a physical body. Therefore, some of them may want to experience a 3D world again. After all, being onto energetics, it may seem, from their perspective, that living in a 3D world and having a physical body is a piece of cake, because in the non-physical everything is possible. Those who manage to get themselves a human body, however, find it much, much harder to live down here than they could ever imagine. It's not an easy ride, but there are things you can do here that you can't do as a non-physical. One of these things is to have sex. Many star beings choose to come to Earth only for that reason. The physical world, which is only about 4% of all that is, can be a double-edged sword. This 4% has different densities, and physicality exists in all of them, in one way or the other, but is never as solid as here in a 3D reality. Nowhere else do you need to first think a solid thought, plan how to execute the thought, and then physically do it in a super dense and slow environment. Very little here happens in an instance. You have to really create it, which takes time. And time is an important factor in 3D. We always feel we race against time, because our lifespan is only about 70 to 85 years. Star races are seeding in the third dimension, and in other dimensions as well within 4-space/time, depending on what the founders want to do when they experiment with genetics. Our ancestors, the Namlu, were beings of all dimensions, but had the ability to live on Terra in a less dense form than we do, and everything else was less dense, too, because Terra existed in another density. Was it still 3D? Yes, but at a higher frequency, one which corresponded with that of the rest of the physical universe. This frequency was later changed by the Syrians. Physicality, which is how we perceive 3D, is held in vibration in many ways. Many of the readers have probably seen these majestic crystal forests underneath the Earth's surface, and how explorers walk around in this awesome world of crystals. If you haven't, I strongly suggest you Google it and check it out. It's really mind-blowing. Still, these forests are like mini forests compared to the crystal forest deeper down under the surface, beyond what humanity is supposed to travel. Those forests are gigantic, like enormous redwood forests. But what are they for? Well, crystals store information and transform information as well, plus they vibrate and are resonant. They store information from the cosmos and transmits information back to the cosmos as well, and keep the third dimension and its physicality in place. So crystals have a profound way of holding the vibration of the third dimension and stabilizing it. Without the crystals, we wouldn't be able to live here. Then it's a totally different ballgame, being trapped here with no obvious way to get out. We lost our multidimensionality at the same moment we decided to stick with our Syrian slave drivers and fell for their flattery when they made some of us for more than others and in charge of the rest. This trapped both those in charge and those who followed order. We may argue that it wasn't our fault and that the Syrians did this on purpose to create a slave race, etc., and that would be absolutely true. But in practicality, what happened was that we agreed to do it their way, more and more so over the millennia, until we trapped ourselves through our genetic lineage and our genetic memories. Now, once our souls take a body, we are caught up in this master-slave mentality. Still, especially now in the nanosecond, 1987-2012, many non-physicals fight over a body here on Earth. Some, like we discussed earlier, come for sex, but the energies down here are intense, and the learning curve extremely high. From a non-physical perspective, that can be quite attractive. Many of those who have watched and studied Earth for some time also understand that it's the numbers that count. We need the numbers to break free. We are 7 billion souls on this planet, and 1,000 times more than that who want bodies here right now, but can't. However, like the Pleiadians say, and which makes total sense to me, is that everybody who lives here on Earth right now is here to participate in the nanosecond in one way or the other. All of us contribute to the intensive energies that can shake the prison walls. 250 years ago or so we were only 1 billion people on the planet, and only in a short time we have increased that number by 7. There is certainly a reason for this, which we will talk more about later. The entrapment which follows with this particular 3D reality we live in is about to fade away for many of us. Not everybody will make it, unfortunately, but we are here to help as many as we can, and that is all our responsibility. The gods love this reality, too, because they can come here and play around with gold, precious stones, DNA, or whatever they want, and everything they do has a ripple effect across the different dimensions. 6. The grid, the frequency fence, the quarantine and the veil of amnesia, how it all works. We have talked about how the third dimension can hold its frequency much due to the great crystal forest underneath the Earth. This, of course, is not the only reason the planet stays in vibration, but perhaps one of the biggest stabilizers. Many think that it's the third dimension that is the trap and that we need to destroy that frequency to be able to become star beings. Not so. This is basically the dimension in which intelligent life starts on most planets after they have been genetically engineered by the founders. Therefore, the normal and healthy procedure for a star race to grow up must progress something like this, and some of this is repetition, just for it to sink in. A new solar system is born. When the planets have cooled down, founders come and ask for permission to create on one or more of the planets. After plant and animal life are seeded, they start creating a more intelligent species that can reach for the stars. This species go through their eras of technology, most of them, and begin to explore their own solar system, hence engineering spaceships that can take them near and far in their own stellar system. Soon enough they start pondering what technology they need in order to reach the stars. However hard they try, they can't figure out how to get there, the distances are too long. At one point or another they realize that they are spirit in the body and that their biological vessels can't make it in space, they are not designed to. They may try robots at first, but the star travel takes way too long. Sooner or later they figure out that there are stargates they can use, but their physical bodies can still not do the trip. Eventually they figure out how to use stargates and galactic and intergalactic highways to travel to other star systems. But first they need to become genetic engineers and be able to find a body template which can withstand the harsh environment out in space. More often than not, the body type which evolved on the original planet can space travel. It is made for a certain planetary environment and not to meet space conditions. Once they have been able to create a more robust body type and learn how to insert fragments of their spirit into those bodies, space travel can begin. At first, a period that can last for thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, the star race is using this particular, slightly inconvenient way to space travel. They notice that to be able to go through stargates etc., they need to be able to travel the dimensions. Not only does the body type have to be able to handle it, but the space vessel as well. Therefore, if we see a UFO that appears very physical, in a nuts and bolts kind of fashion, we can be sure it's either our own military, or a star race using it for travel only within the solar system, where it's not essential to use stargates. The interdimensional crafts are more sophisticated and appear more fluid. They appear and disappear in and out of our reality, and they seem fuzzy and unclear. That's why we see so many UFO photos where the craft is blurry and hard to distinguish. Hence, the debunkers think they can debunk those as hoaxes, when in fact they are more likely being real than any others we see. There are certain body types that are more robust than others, and this is the reason why we have all these reports of people who have seen all those different types of gray aliens, reptilians, and draconians. Most star races figure out with time that these types of genetics are more likely to withstand the harsh space and interdimensional environments. On their home planets, these entities may look entirely different. However, by saying this, I don't imply that there are no planets who actually host gray and reptilian beings. There are. They are, just like the human template, quite common in the universe. Still, even if a planet is populated by reptilian beings, it's not a given that their particular genetics are suited for space travel. They may still have to adjust the genetics to be able to travel to the stars. Eventually, an intelligent star race figures out how to travel between stars without bodies and spaceships. Sometimes they even figure it out before they have to use physical craft and artificial bodies to do so. They realize that they are individual souls who also have an avatar-like body. Once they've done that, they pretty soon understand that they can travel long distances only by using thoughts, emotions, and intention. They can leave their original body at home and split their soul into fragments and send a fragment on a mission to another place in the universe. Here they can explore on a spiritual level, or manifest themselves by using their avatar. They realize they can take any shape and form, appearing just as physical as if they had a real physical body. Only problem is that there are certain things they can't do while using only their avatar. One such thing is having sex. They can appear physical enough even to shake hands with a physical being, but there is not real neurology in the avatar that can feel the sensations of having sex and touching another being. If the purpose of this star race is to conquer other star systems, they may do so in the nano world, by attaching themselves to already existing bodies on the planet they're visiting, and slowly take over. Or, if they know how to genetically engineer, they can clone bodies within the solar system they are visiting and use these bodies to conquer. The bodies they are using may look exactly like the bodies of those they are conquering, which will be very confusing for those who are attacked, or they may manifest as something else. They may want to create bodies that are stronger and more endurable than their original ones, or the ones of the inhabitants of the planet they're conquering. Either by self-realization, or the star race may encounter a race who is more evolved and teach them more peaceful ways of living. Sooner or later a star race grows up and stops creating violence around them and becomes a more peaceful race. And of course, far from every star race will become conquerors, either. Still, there are star races who prefer technology before spirituality and continue killing and raping for a very long time. The Syrians are one such race. Some channeled material say such beings are of negative density and evolve as service to self, SDS, love to self, contrary to those who choose to experience love as service to others, SDO. The star race will learn universal laws, often by experience. They come to the insights that they should not interact with evolving star races on other 3D planets and interfere with their learning lessons. They will learn that it would be a break of the universal law of non-interference. Not until a star race is able to nano-travel and communicate telepathically can another star race contact them and ask them for permission to descend on their planet. If the stationary star races agrees, trading treaties and other agreements may be set up, and also exchange of knowledge in all different fields may be established, and they may even build a federation if they want. Each star race is indexed by their creator gods to a certain planet, and their bodies are adapted to live on that particular world, breathe its atmosphere and move around comfortably. If another star race would have been able to visit a certain planet in their own bodies, the conditions would most probably be wrong for them, and they'd had to wear spacesuits all the time, or the gravitational field would be too heavy or too light. The planet may be too close or too far away from the sun, and the visitor would either burn up or freeze. On a planet where beings are not trapped, and there is no amnesia between lives, indexed bodies can still cease to function when they are material and die, but then the soul just takes a new body, with memories intact. As we shall see, in theory the Surian overlords broke the law of non-interference and the law of free will, although technically they didn't. Just like here on Earth, criminals can be very creative when it comes to bypassing common laws to be able to commit their crimes. Hence, the legislators always have to come up with new laws to prevent this from happening. The Syrians are experts in bypassing these laws, and soon we shall see how they do it. The problem is that in the universe there is no one who is going to change the basic laws because of criminals. The basic laws are the laws that make a particular universe function and can't be altered. It took me a long time to research and rewire my neurological pathways before I could comprehend that most of the spaceships and UFOs people see are, when they are not weather phenomena etc., either man-made, driven by extraterrestrials who are using them while traveling within our solar system, or if they are interstellar, they are maneuvered by a star race who is traveling through the dimensions via stargates and portals, or that some actually travel in the subquantum world, on a subatomic level. The Earth governments were given UFO technology through TTPs, often in exchange for giving the star race permission to abduct humans to explore and enhance our DNA to fit their purposes, not ours. The upgrading of Homo sapiens has never stopped. It continues endlessly. After all, this is a genetic library, so they think they can do whatever they want. Well, they can, especially now, when they have permission. In other words, technically they are doing nothing wrong. It was the governments who should never have agreed to the exchange, but greed and power took the best of them, and sadly, when it comes to our Earth government, this seems to be the case. Other, more benevolent star races visited the US government as well, but were rejected. The government decided to work with those who could give them technology, not how to bring peace to Earth. The Syrians are a very technologically sophisticated race. They have been around for billions of years and know their stuff. And the Aryans are even more savvy, especially when it comes to genetic engineering and manipulation of existing species. However, like the Pleiadians so often point out, just because a star race are creator gods, they are not necessarily spiritually evolved, and they emphasize this in particular when it comes to the Syrians and the Mayans, who had a connection with the Maya star system in the Pleiades. They started out as a highly evolved race and even created civilizations here, which they inserted, like I talked about earlier in this paper. However, sometimes the creator gods want to explore and feel how it would be to be part of the creation they are behind and thus descend to participate in the life of the civilization. This is what made the Mayans corrupt. Too many temptations, and they couldn't handle it. We humans have to be morally and ethically stronger than the Mayans, even to be able to make it, and cast temptations aside and point our noses towards the goal of becoming sovereign. If this was a normal 3D reality, we would have reached the stars a long time ago, but this is not a normal 3D reality, something we will discuss further. 6.1 The influence from the artificial moon. I want to use the analogy of a radio station again, because it explains the mechanics around this trap. Imagine a radio where the creator gods can turn the knob and tune into any station they want. They choose to tune into the 3D station to create life on a planet. Life evolves, and one day the developing race learns how to turn the knob themselves and all of a sudden become interdimensional, because they can easily go to any radio station as soon as they learn to work the knob. They can even split themselves up and use 2, 3, 4, 10 radios and tune them all into different stations and experience different dimensions and realities. They have a lot of fun doing this, and no one is stopping them. However, on one planet called Terra, a species is being created within the 3D radio station, which is normal. However, the creator gods don't let their creation evolve, but mess with their DNA so that they can't easily reach the stars and instead become obedient slaves. Furthermore, the creator gods lock the radio knob into one position so that the evolving race can't turn the knob in any direction. It's stuck. And here we are, stuck in a 3D reality when we should have been exploring the universe. But how did the Surian overlords do it? First of all planets have layers of energy grids around them as a natural thing, so we can experience reality from different time frames. 8, 9. If an ET wants to enter our reality, they need to know which portal to use, because otherwise they may enter in the wrong time and the planet may be barren or dominated by dinosaurs when in fact the ET wanted to enter into the 21st century. There is an abundance of portals like that around and on the planet. I mentioned but a few in Level I. I must admit here that I am not sure about the sequence of how they did it, but I am confident that it was done in the below manner. The reader will probably realize what a great ordeal it is to keep humankind stuck in this prison. It takes a lot of effort to keep consciousness trapped. Someone said that it's like holding a blown-up balloon down with your hand to the bottom of a pool. It will stay there as long as you hold it, but as soon as you let go, the balloon immediately floats up to the surface. The same thing with soul consciousness. It's a whole complex science that needs to function with no fail for thousands of years. The least of failures, and the trapped souls may wake up and escape, or start confronting the controllers. Therein lies our solution. This is the weakness of the trap. Now, when learning the mechanics of the entrapment, let us start with the moon. To begin with, our moon is not a natural planetary body in the sense that it belongs here. It was put here by interdimensional beings. Some even say that it's too big to be our moon, in comparison with the size of Earth. Others have said that it was put there to spy on us humans to make sure we are staying put, and yes, spying may be one function, but it was hardly just because of that the moon was put there. So who put the moon there to begin with? Well, we know for a fact that it has been placed there because they have found rocks and minerals on the moon that are far older than our own solar system. 10. This alone proves it's not a natural satellite to our planet. Another interesting observation is that when you look at the full moon in the sky, it appears to be exactly the same size as the sun viewed from Earth. Someone was good at math and a whole lot of other sciences. Some would argue that the moon was put there by the original creator gods, those from Orion and elsewhere across the universe, and others would say it was the Sirians, and that it in fact is a Sirian hollowed-out spacecraft. Figure 3.6. The Moon City with its moon towers. Click on image to enlarge. I have no evidence which one it could be, but I can say with quite some certainty that the moon is now owned by the Dark Lords from Sirius and their minions, the Greys. They have bases all around the moon, and especially on the dark side of the moon. Why doesn't the moon rotate around its own axis, you may ask? I would say because it's forced not to. They have secrets and they hide them on the dark side. Also, to all these scientists' great surprise, they made the moon vibrate and ring like a bell just recently, and they say that it would only do that if it's hollow. Exactly. And if we are to believe remote viewer, Ingo Swan, he saw a naked being working under the surface of the moon. 11. They even detected him when he approached them by nano-traveling, and he had to quickly escape back into his body here on Earth, and he discovered towers on the moon. He was right, the towers are there. I included a video in Level I, and I've had it verified that it's authentic. AR of LPGC has told me that similar towers have been found on Earth, hidden halfway underground in the jungle in Africa. I believe it was a jungle which is hard to penetrate, unless you know what you are looking for and how to get there, via helicopter for example. The only other way to detect them is by remote viewing or ENS, DEF, which is AR's specialty. Here is the link to the same video I released in the Level I papers, http://wespenre.com/video/mooncityapollo20.avi. The Syrians, to create an obedient slave race, had to keep us trapped, or we would automatically evolve and challenge them. I think the moon has a part in it. Someone, probably an Lil and his crew, took one of their hollowed-out planetoids, put it in place where it ought to be at the moment in order to create the effect they wanted. Like the Pleiadians say, the moon has been moved into different positions over time and has not always been on the distance from Earth as it is today. Perhaps the distance had to be adjusted at times when we started getting uncomfortable with our master-slave situation, and they could reprogram us after have adjusted the position of the artificial satellite. The towers, however, and what looks like ruins, don't seem to be used anymore, and the whole construct on the moon that is shown in the video seems abandoned. Probably, more sophisticated ways of doing things were invented and the old ways were abandoned, only leaving the ruins as reminders of times that were. Moreover, the Pleiadians, in one of their CDs from fall 2010, are telling us the following about the moon, and I paraphrase. The moon is an artificial construct and not a natural body. It has been a battleground for control of Earth for a long, long time. The moon rules our emotions and goes deep into the unconscious mind. This is why it works to put out so-called moon papers when it's new moon and full moon, and without the moon the world would be a totally different place. To develop the civilization the way it is developed, the moon was needed. The moon keeps things in balance. It has a powerful effect on gravitational and magnetic forces, and there are even rogue scientists today who realize that the center of gravity and magnetism may not be on Earth at all. It may be somewhere between Earth and the moon. We also know that the moon has a lot to do with women's menstrual cycles. Personally, I am extremely sensitive to the position of the moon. When there is a full moon, I am extra cautious, because odd, and not always good, things tend to happen on that day and the day before and after. I know for a fact I am not imagining it, and I have had it confirmed by others as well. It's not too uncommon, but most people may not connect it to the moon cycles. So by manipulating the distance of the moon to Earth, and probably adjusting other things related to it as well, the Syrians can control our emotions, keep us in a state of fear and uncertainty and thus have their food source guaranteed. All they need to do is to enhance our fear and anxiety whenever is needed. Not until we learn how to vibrate slightly higher than the 3D frequency they have us stuck in can we evolve above the fear and anxiety that is intentionally created so they can feed off it, but also keep us under control. The moon is important in this respect. There will be an additional paper here in Level 2, which will deal with the moon, Mars, and other control stations used by the Syrians, so I will only touch the surface here in this particular paper. 6.2 The Time Lock. Once the Syrians got the idea to create a slave race who is not allowed to reach the stars, to keep them trapped they also had to create something which can be most easily described as a time lock. the human race who was already here, the Namlu was multidimensional and could travel interdimensionally between the stars. This, of course, had to stop if your purpose was to enslave a race. Therefore, the Dark Lords reconstructed the natural grids around the planet to create this artificial time lock, which would keep their slave race from experiencing simultaneous time. They had to have them adjust to a straight, linear timeline. However, this is not easily done, because we live in a multiverse where our thoughts and actions create new realities, and thus new timelines continuously, but the trick was to, in addition to create this artificial grid, make the slave race oblivious to whom they were and where they came from, plus the whole conception of time, timelines, and reality in general. This way, these master manipulators could manipulate people's thoughts and create their realities for them in a manner which was more in line with what the Syrians wanted us to believe in order to control us and our destiny. In addition, and in line with the above, the Syrians had to rearrange the DNA of the prototypes they were creating so that when a spirit entered the body, it was locked into the grid, both in a more lofty fashion but also through their manipulated bodies. Thus, the Dark Lords thought they had constructed the perfect trap. However, the grid, the artificial grid, here spelled with a capital G, was not at all perfect. It was meant to also lock certain frequencies of light and prevent it from reaching the surface of the planet. Light carries information. This was done in order to keep humankind uninformed. But the grid was like a Swiss cheese, and pillars of light could penetrate, coming in from the sun and the cosmos in general, and now from the galactic center, as we are aligning 12. This didn't bother the Syrians too much, because even when the light was able to penetrate, the DNA was rearranged in such a way that the information went right through the human bodies without being absorbed, because there was no one there who knew how to receive it. But there was something else with the imperfect grid that the Syrian overlords were very concerned about. The grid could be used as an escape route after the person died. The Dark Lords did not want that to happen. They had invested a lot in this control system, so they wanted the same souls to incarnate over and over, just to be recycled into a new slave body here on Earth. Therefore, they invested a lot of time in figuring out how to prevent souls from escaping after death. The solution to the problem was a tunnel of light. When a human soul left her dead body, she was normally confused, because she had been kept ignorant and didn't know what to do and where to go. So, some souls stayed discarnate, hovering over Earth, while others attached themselves to another human body, unquiet dead. See Metaphysics paper number 3, and some escaped through the pillars of light, the holes in the Swiss cheese. None of this was what the Syrians wanted, so they created this tunnel of light, which was often connected with a warm, fuzzy feeling, and false images of dead relatives leading them towards the tunnel. More often than not, there were also spirit guides there to greet them and meet them after they separated from their bodies, and sometimes it could also be a religious experience, with a Jesus figure waiting on the other end, or some other religious deity before Jesus' time. The whole purpose was to direct the deceased away from the holes in the grid and manipulate them into the trap. Once the spirit had agreed to enter the tunnel, they were sucked in with an enormous speed, almost like a cosmic vacuum cleaner, and entered the between-life area, where they met with their dead relatives and friends, or fragments of their souls, left in the afterlife to keep the new, ignorant spirit busy. The BLA was in fact just a relay station where the spirit was waiting for her next turn to be recycled. Here in the afterlife, the spirit could relax with friends for a while and experience some extraordinary things she could do with her avatar-like body. One of these things was she could manifest a whole reality for herself. She could create a house out of the blue, a horse to ride on, almost whatever she wished to do. After a while, however, it was time to be recycled again. The Syrians and their helpers, residing in this dimension, and whose job it was to manage these in-between spirits, had to block the memories of their victims before they were shot back into a body. So the souls who were about to be recycled received some heavy-duty implants before they were ready for their next lives. They were put in a chair and were spun around, while bombarded with images in a rapid speed, telling them to obey their masters, and to forget about previous lives. Some of these implant stations were located on Mars, others in the Pyrenees, 13-14. From there, the soul was then shot into a new body with all memories erased, and so it went on, life after life, up to this very day. Very little has changed. The only thing that apparently has changed over time is that some souls who have been heavily implanted over time appear not to need the amnesia treatment anymore, and will automatically take a new body when one becomes available. They don't even have to go through the tunnel of light at all. So, one way to escape would be to disappear out through one of the holes in the grid, explore the universe from a soul level. You automatically become multi-D and inter-D once you have penetrated the grid and escaped and join a civilization, or the beings on a planet you feel you would be happy residing on. This, of course, is a secret no one will tell you about, not even the best of the channel entities, because they all want us to stay here and work it out from our Earth perspective. Those channel entities, including the Pleiadians, have much invested in us in the living library, and want us to defeat the Syrian overlords from our 3D perspective by upgrading our DNA, raising our consciousness, and build a new Earth. Why do they want us? Because if we do, it will also change their future, which is where they come from, and hopefully stop their own tyranny under which they live. This pertained in particular to the Pleiadians, who could trace back the tyranny they lived under to decisions we made during the nanosecond between 1987-2012, which has affected their own timeline negatively. Therefore, they tell us, they are here to help us make more ethical and pro-survival decisions and thus change our own future timeline, which will affect theirs. So, in other words, they are here to work out their own karma, which has to do with their own interference with humans and the Earth in their past, which would be our present and our past. For this to work, it requires that we stay here in our 3D bodies, raise our consciousness, and become multidimensional without technology, or with minimal technology, and that we claim our sovereignty as human beings. If this succeeds, the Syrians would have to leave, or play out their own karma in another version of Earth, where those who refuse to wake up will potentially spend the rest of their future together with their slave masters. They can of course anytime change their course, but it will be harder and harder the longer people wait. The nanosecond was a time window when the galactic center has been bombarding us with information carried on gamma rays and other frequencies of the higher electromagnetic spectrum, and we have had a chance in a million to upgrade ourselves. Still, be aware that there is a choice. We do have opportunities to leave this planet and go somewhere else, particularly when we experience body death, but we also have the option to stay here with our fellow humans and ride things out, remain system busters, and help raising the energies and regain the rights to this planet. These are the same rights we, in conjunction with the original founders, once had, and as a result flesh the Syrians out, or have them integrate with our higher vibrations and forgive. If everybody who knows how to do it chooses to escape, the rest of humanity, who has been more heavily implanted and are not yet able to see the new dawn, will be doomed. No one will judge us if we escape, but it takes more courage, love and caring to stay and ride it out, especially as I believe we can do it. More about that later. And remember, once we've raised our consciousness we don't need to go through the tunnel towards the light anymore. We can come back with memories intact, no amnesia implants, and continue our work, and mind you, we can, if things get ugly, escape at any time. But again, those who want to leave are absolutely free to do so. We don't have a contract to stay here. When the God spell is broken, it's by choice. There is no need to go into the tunnel of light. When you've read this, you are at that point. The key to freedom is disobedience toward those who keep us in chains. Remember, they need to have our permission to enslave us, whether it's a conscious decision or not. Of course, we have to be smart about it and not just go and sit in the forest and think we're disobeying the Syrians. It's a process, and can only be done if we choose to stay for some lifetimes yet. There are more things to be aware of as well, but we shall go into that later, in an upcoming paper. Also, when I say we must forgive those who suppress us, it must steer of some controversy. Why forgive those who have murdered and slaughtered? Well, we must forgive those who decide to repent, because this also means we forgive ourselves. We are all in this together, and to leave a long era of tumult and chaos while still holding grudges against somebody is not going to make us happy. By this I don't mean we should turn a blind eye to what they are doing in present time, quite the opposite. We help where our help is asked for and needed, but spend most of our time developing ourselves to be able to inspire and lift others up so we can reach for the stars together. Everybody has their own local universe inside of them, and we all create our own reality in conjunction with others who work in our realm of frequency. The Syrians who decide to proceed with these inhumane processes also create their own living hell and in the long run will eradicate themselves, something we will go into the mechanics about as well in a later paper. Each being needs to work out their own inner conflicts, that's just how it works, and needs to be understood by the evolving human. Don't interfere too much with others' unhandled conflicts and grudge games. It will lead you nowhere beside towards eradication of self, literally. Forgive where you can and move on. In the meantime, help those who need a push in the right direction, but don't interfere with their learning lessons. Like a certain native Indian said, a true warrior knows when to walk away. The Pleiadians lecture the following. Because of the time locks that were put upon the portals here, and because the corridors of time are owned, those out in the cosmos are not able to find Earth. Its light of existence was erased. A different electromagnetic spectrum, a harmless one that does not register the kind of consciousness Earth has, was put here so that Earth could not be found. Earth was covered up, quarantined. 15. If only one road exists in and out, and it is locked, then commerce is forbidden from entering time corridor, and it is cut off completely from all other influences. 16. The bottom line here is that the Syrian overlords owned the corridors of time from the moment they locked us into 3D. Earth became invisible for visitors in general. They simply couldn't find her. She was hidden in a frequency band not commonly used, and if someone was looking in that range, Earth was still cloaked and extremely hard to find unless you knew how. They own the portals that come to the planet, and leave it. We are sitting in the middle of PESHME-10, one of the main galactic highways, and we're blocking it. And what is more, they use our energies to tighten and strengthen the grid. How? Due to that we vibrate on a locked-in frequency, and the more chaos and tumult, the tighter the grid, the less chance there is to penetrate it. Still, there are those pillars of light, which means the cloaking was never perfect, and never will be. The grid will never be repaired and made perfect. The Dark Lords couldn't do it in the past, and they certainly can't do it now, because it's too late. 7 billion people are vibrating in unison towards a higher consciousness. You can almost hear the musical pitch change upwards, like when you tune a guitar to a higher note. As a musician, in my mind I can hear it, literally. Going backwards in time again for a moment, things changed drastically in the whole universe back in 1945 when we opened up the gateways to the universe and made our presence known in the most destructive way. We had learned how to split the atom and use that knowledge to nuke Hiroshima and Nagasaki, watching the mushroom clouds reach the sky. Some watched it with excitement, thinking it was a wonderful revenge for the attack on Pearl Harbor. America is great. In an instant, we told the universe where we are. That's when star beings from all over the universe rushed over here across the dimensions. Most of them were extremely concerned, because here was a civilization who could split the atom but used it destructively on their own planet, their own home. And the effects of those explosions, plus all of those that came after, rippled out across the dimensions in a most destructive way. We told the universe, hey, we're here. But no one was impressed. Most were happy that we were kept in quarantine and voted for that we should remain isolated that way. 17. No one wanted to give us a ticket to the stars. 6.3 civilizations inserted through time portals. After the destruction of the original Terra during the War of the Titans, the Syrians had to reconstruct the whole planet, which we will talk more about in the next paper. Before the genetic engineering and manipulation began, there was no grid around Earth. It was basically set up here more than 500,000 years ago to seal Earth off from the rest of the universe, while the frequency fence, which locked our ancestors into 3D, was set up about 300,000 years ago. The Syrians' own founders, the ones who worked with them, such as the Aryan called Enki, and the Syrian female known as Ninhursag, Ninki, or just Nin, recreated much of the fauna and flora from seeds they had stored since earlier, but they were not the ones who recreated the living library. About 500,000 years ago, when our planet was really coming to life again, whole civilizations were inserted on Earth via time portals, by first penetrating the grid through the pillars of light. This was not an easy task due to the artificial grid, but it was done nonetheless. These events are quite extensively explained in Barbara Marcinet's channel book, Earth, Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library. The Pleiadians tell us that the planet at this time was owned by the Syrians, although they call them Lizzies in the book after a devastating space war, the Titan Wars, which the Lizzies won. However, those who cared for the living library, the original founders, reinserted both the library and civilizations that existed here side by side with the Syrians. These beings could do things like this. They had whole blueprints, or templates, for civilizations that had worked well elsewhere and still did, because time is simultaneous, and often they used these blueprints and inserted them on other worlds, with small modifications and alterations to better fit with the existing environment. They transported these civilizations through the corridors of time, just to manifest them wherever they felt it was right to do so. Some of these civilizations here on Earth existed for 500 years, others for 1,000 years or more, but most of them were eventually fought off by the Syrians and disappeared. However, they did not cease to exist, because on a multidimensional level they are always existing. Sometimes, the founders inserted a new civilization on top of the old one, and archaeologists who find remnants of them today think they are totally separate from each other, although they may not be able to figure out where they came from so suddenly. There are a lot of missing links. In reality, they are just layers upon layers, and when the time portals open again, like they do now, all these civilizations will start existing simultaneously as time collapses and timelines start merging at the end of a cycle. Clues to all these civilizations can be found all around the planet today, some above ground, others underground. This will be more real to people when we break free from what exopolitical writer Neil Freer calls the God spell, and we can look at things from other time perspectives, which are unique not only to 3D. What is a timeline, really? For a timeline to exist, it must have something like a primary event that it can be anchored to. The Pleiadians, in the same book, say that the primary event that hooked us to this timeline was the consciousness of man. 18. It is very interesting to see how much extraterrestrial influences there have been on this planet throughout her history, and it has all been hidden in plain sight to the whole population. Everyday people are coexisting amongst clues and artifacts which we take for granted as a part of our environment, when indeed these clues have incredible ancient stories to tell. Instead of exploring the real history of mankind and the ramifications of the alien influences, we have been designed and distracted in such a way that we'd rather look into things that do not matter and which will eventually dig our own graves. The question is, if we let our own ignorance be our nemesis, will there be another civilization after us which can interpret the clues of our existence, or are we the last civilization on Earth? We have a lot of important choices to make, so please, mankind, stop watching reality shows and violent sports on TV, or entertain yourselves with the newest cell phones or other high-tech devices. These are the technologies of the gods, which have brought them into their own hell. Do we really want to share their hell, letting them remain the ones holding the pitchfork?